Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning or good evening, wherever you are based in the world, and welcome to the latest Boutique Hotel News webinar. Today, we're talking about branded residences. For those who don't know me, I'm Eloise Hanson. I am the editor of Boutique Hotel News, and we are a global multimedia website covering the lifestyle, luxury, and boutique hotel sectors. We have two sponsors for today's session, the first of which is Like Magic, a hospitality tech platform for guests, employees, and operators. And we have a short video to play for you today. And further details about Like Magic have been popped into the chat if you would like to find out more. And our second sponsor for today is London Rock Partners, a hotel management company. And we have Claire on the call to do a much better introduction than I ever could. So Claire, over to you.
Hi, my name is Claire Anna, and I am the co-founder of London Rock Partners. We are a UK-based hotel management company who started out in business about 2 years ago. We came to the market to offer a more flexible and agile solution to the traditional hotel management platforms. We specialise in transforming underperforming and distressed assets across branded and independent spaces. The goal is to make contracting terms easy and flexible in line with how changeable the market has been over the last few years. We currently manage 2 Hiltons, an adventure park, a man-made surfing lagoon, believe it or not, a hotel in Bournemouth, and a new build 5-star in the Northwest. We will be delighted to talk to any owners and investors, and I believe my details are on the screen as well as in the chat room. Thanks, Eloise.
Thank you, Claire. Fantastic. Well, as Claire mentioned, please follow up with the details that we've popped into the chat if you would like to find out more. Now we're handing over to our speakers today. Let's get to know these guys a bit better. And I'm going to move from left to right as they appear on your PowerPoint slides there. So Dimitri, I'm coming to you first, please.
Thank you, Louise. Hello, everybody. My name is Dimitris Manikis, and I'm the president for Europe, Middle East, Eurasia, and Africa for Wyndham Hotels and Resorts, and I'm based out of Hammersmith in London.
Thanks, Dimitri. And over to Louis next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Louis Keeley. I head up the Global Residential Development Consultancy Department at Savills. We're also based in the UK. We've got a global remit, so we work all the way from the Caribbean to Japan. Our core business is consultancy. Hopefully a few of you will have had our reports previously, but we also get involved with brand negotiation and capital markets as well.
Thank you, Louis. And Meredith, coming to you next, please.
Hello, thank you. My name is Meredith Strongen. I'm Managing Director with AECOM Capital Real Estate. I'm based in New York, but our headquarters are in LA. AECOM Capital, for those of you not familiar, is a real estate platform. We have over 8 billion in either asset value or in development, and we invest in a joint venture along with high quality developers in all types of asset classes in US top 25 markets.
Thank you, Meredith. And last but not least, Mark.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Purcell. I'm the Senior Vice President of Development for Accor, with a focus in the Americas on our luxury and lifestyle products. Accor is a global leading hospitality company offering more than 40 hotel brands, multiple residential brands, and a variety of related businesses across the global platform.
Thank you, Mark. And just to note that the LinkedIn profiles of all our speakers have also been popped into the chat, and I encourage you all to connect and carry on the conversation after we have finished today. So just to run you guys through very quickly how this webinar is actually going to play out, we're going to spend around 45 minutes in discussion today, followed by some time at the end to take any questions from the audience. So anybody that is tuning in, if you do have a very pressing question or an urgent question, please submit these using the Q&A function or using the chat box, and I will get round to asking these as and when. And a recording of today's conversation will be emailed out to everybody that has registered within 48 hours. Now, if this is the first time that you have signed in or tuning in to one of our webinars, we always like to highlight some context, some background information to today's conversation. And on your screens now are some stories that have been published on Boutique Hotel News. Now, luxury hotel brand Aman opened its first branded residences in New York last summer, which are co-located within a hotel. And the group CEO, Vlad Doronin, said at the time, "It marked our greatest investment into a single destination to date." And similarly, lifestyle hotel brands are also venturing into the space, as we can see with Mama Shelter, which is set to launch the group's first branded residences in Dubai. And the news ties in with Accor's introduction of a dedicated platform to support the development and operation of branded residences and mixed-use projects. It's called Accor One Living. On the next slide, we have some further examples of how the branded residential sector is evolving. Marriott's soft brand, which is the Autograph Collection, is a growing portfolio of independent homes, and the first standalone branded residence site is coming to London in 2024. And there's even non-hospitality brands which are diversifying into the space. Crystal manufacturer Baccarat will open a hotel and residences in Dubai in 2026 under SH Hotels and Resorts. And the article at the bottom of your screens with the headline Lamborghini, Armani and Bulgari highlights a report from Morgan's International Realty. And in this article, it states that 42 branded residences are currently under construction in Dubai. And at the end of 2022, buyers were faced with a typical 37% premium for branded compared to non-branded residences. So I hope that sparks your curiosity for the topic today. We are going to be talking about branded residences, and I'm going to kick off with a question to Louis. Louis, Savills runs a report about branded residences, and I would like to know your key takeaways. So can you provide us with a snapshot of those key learnings?
Of course. So I hope most of you have seen the report, but for those who haven't, I think the key takeaway here is, look, it's a sector that's grown enormously, 150% in the last 10 years. It's obviously a concept that was established in the US and it's growing worldwide now. There are over 650 schemes worldwide, and that's set to go up to 1,100 by 2027. Biggest growth by geography, 400% growth in the Middle East and over 200% in the Asia Pacific. So top markets are Dubai, Miami is actually still featuring the top markets, New York as well. But what's interesting is of the top 15 locations, 10 of them are either resort or emerging market locations. So I think that's a bit of a sort of understanding of how diversified that market can be. There are some key players in the industry. Marriott have been absolutely at the top for some time now, since 2002, in fact. And a little nod to Mark here, Accor is one of our rising stars. So was 5th in the leaderboards back in 2021. Come up to 3rd this year or in 2022, and is set to be 2nd going forward. So some key players still there. If you're looking at individual brands, Four Seasons still top of the leaderboard, then followed by Ritz-Carlton and Marriott brands, Regis. And what's also interesting, and I think we'll touch on it later in the conversation, is seeing the non-hotelier brands also starting to rise within the industry. So You is a popular name you would have heard of before, and they get involved with design brands, fashion brands, automotive brands. But I guess as well, you've got to also think about chain scales. So brand residences has always been associated to luxury. What we're seeing now is actually that there's an increase in upscale. Can mid-scale exist in branded resi? All of these are hot topics. And I guess finally, I think the important point to finish on in terms of the highlights from the report, and I think it's the element that everyone always wants to look at, is brand premium. So every year we try and calculate premiums and how they change. And the global average this year is 30%, but that changes depending on location. So if you're looking at pure resorts, that's at about 32%, and cities a bit lower at 24%. So, huge amount of scope to be motivating developers and brands to be getting into the sector.
Mm-hmm. Louis, where can we find this report?
So we actually have just relaunched our website. So what we can do, hopefully at the end of this webinar, we can share a link to our website. You'll then get an opportunity to download our report. We'll include obviously a recording of this webinar too, and our track record in helping brands and developers alike.
Mm-hmm. I'll ask my team as well, if they're running things behind the scenes, if they're able to access that report and put it into the chat, that would be really appreciated. Sticking with Louis for the moment being, what are buyers looking for?
So I think the biggest change from last year, I'll try and keep it brief because obviously we can really go on a tangent with buyers. But the biggest change that we've seen is the increase in a younger generation being attracted to brand residences. So what does that really mean in terms of how those brand residences need to adapt? And for us, from where we're at, the big changes have been in amenitization and servicing, and how that needs to change to correspond to a younger demographic. So even things like COVID, what do people need in their brand residences? They need more space, they need office space. There's more of an attention drawn to wellness. We've seen a greater attraction to more accessible locations. That doesn't mean to say it's got to be in cities, but places that you can get to easily, close access to airports, infrastructure, etc. And on a slightly different topic, I guess, we've also seen an increase in sustainability within the sector. It's a hot topic across the whole of real estate, but I think particularly, for the luxury branded residences, striking that balance of offering big servicing, offering quality, offering, what's deemed to be the very luxury, can be a little bit in contrast to the sustainable element, to the sustainability of a project. So I think there's got to be some awareness that these projects still have to remain sustainable, and that's something that's very important to people these days.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Louis. Meredith, does what Louis has just highlighted, does this tally with what you're seeing with the branded residence projects that you guys have in, I believe, Nashville and West Hollywood?
Yes, we do. We have a Four Seasons in Nashville that opened this past year. And then in West Hollywood in Los Angeles, we have a Pendry Residences by Montage that also about a year and a half ago opened. I would say both of those markets are kind of a little unique, and not as they weren't highlighted in anything that Louis said. They're new to the condo market in general. So it's a very kind of unique situation. In LA, we are definitely seeing a skewer. The age bracket has skewed a little bit lower than we had originally anticipated. There's a wide range of homeowners that have wanted to be attracted to the luxury lifestyle experience, but really being affiliated with the excitement of the Pendry Hotel that we are connected to. So I would say that is definitely predominant in that project. In Nashville itself, it is a lot of secondary homes, and the age tends to actually be a little bit on the older.
Yeah. Okay, fascinating. I know we recently held an event in Lisbon, and admittedly this wasn't the conversation that was had at the time wasn't around branded residences, but it was a serviced apartment operator, apart hotel operator, who actually talked about the possibility of taking on new developments and reducing the sizes of the rooms, because they found that travelers and guests no longer needed that extra space, which is what we often assume with having a serviced apartment or apart hotel operator, that you need the extra space. But we will talk about this a bit later on, so hold that thought. Mark, coming to you next, please. How do you decide which project should include a rental program? And I know some of the examples that I gave earlier, there's the opportunity, I believe it's Amman that I highlighted. Owners can actually, when not in the property, put that unit back to Oman, and that they can therefore rent out that unit to those that wish to stay in it. So how do you decide?
Yeah, so just to set the stage of what that product offering is, in many cases, especially in urban market, you will have what's called a whole ownership residential unit. That would typically be a second home for someone. No one would be in that unit other than the homeowner from a stay perspective. So while they may not live there permanently, that unit would only be used when they are in residence. The alternative product is the rental program, whereby a unit owner can commit the residents back into basically hotel inventory. So this is always typically with a co-located hotel product. What we typically see in most cases is when it's a resort offering, is when that rental program typically would take place. It does happen sometimes in urban locations. You know, there are a lot of challenges that can come up with rental program projects typically over time. As most of the people on the webinar who are in the hotel industry know, you know, hotel ownership, hotel product is a capital intensive business. And, you know, over time, when significant upgrades need to get done to a unit and it's a rental program, that can come back to the unit owners as costs that have to really be factored in as they consider whether or not they want to participate in a rental program, because there is a lot of requirements to meet brand standards, to make sure your product is up to the brand standard, that you have the appropriate package in the unit and things of that nature. So, but it is a great opportunity to, when you're not in residence, to make some proceeds off of owning that real estate.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Mark. I just want to, Louis, bear with me just one moment. Just wanted to highlight that the Savills report has been popped into the chat for those wanting to know more, and a reminder to submit your questions into the chat, and I'll get round to these. Louis, coming to you.
Oh, no, I was going to add that, so we obviously come across this quite a lot in the consultancy reports that we provide for our clients. And I think what's important is to also take into consideration the buyers. So it's not only the developers that need to make the choice between offering the program or not, but actually, if you look at, you know, the buyer profiles of who's going to be coming in, that's when there's the second stage where you decide whether or not a rental program should or should not be integrated. And of course, that's got to be, you know, undertaken by the brand and accepted by the brand. But, you know, in some locations, and particularly for us, it's funny, it's actually the places with high seasonality that tend to lend themselves well to rental management programs. So you take Alpine or, as Mark said, you know, those resort locations where people don't want to be in there full time, and there's a huge yielding potential. So at the beginning of any of our consultancy reports, we we do a big buyer profile analysis of who the likely purchasers will be for a specific scheme. And if that's tailored towards what we call the investors, the pure investors, or the investor users, those who don't want to use the units all that much, but want to generate a yield from them, then that becomes an interesting conversation with the brands to see whether or not it could work between the two.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Louis. Mark, coming back to you, I touched on it earlier in my context about the evolution of the branded residence space and how it's changing over the years. But what do you think are the trends that are driving this change or evolution within branded residences?
Well, I think the most prominent one is this transition to standalone branded residential that is not co-located with a hotel. And in your you put forth some great headlines when you opened the webinar, showing some examples of that. And you're seeing most of the major hotel companies who have a branded residence offering transitioning into this standalone residential product. And I think it makes a lot of sense. There are certainly a lot of destinations and markets where there's more need for residential product, or there's more desire for a residential buyer than there might be need for an additional hotel product. But people still want to have, what I consider the reason for that premium that Louis highlighted is, it's sort of that stamp of approval, that stamp of status that one would get from a branded residential, just the knowledge that the quality level of the product, the quality level of the service is going to be there. And I want to have it, really across my life. So that standalone residence gives that offering. It is important in those cases that there's enough infrastructure in place so that the operator of the residence has the ability to deliver the service level. And there is a differentiation. You see some of, and I think this is a bit more prevalent with some of the retail brands, there's a licensing product or a licensing offering where the quality level of the product is going to be tied to that offering. And then that second stage is that level of service and what is on a day-to-day basis being delivered to the customer. So those are two little bit differentiators between a typical hotel branded residence from a standalone perspective, and maybe some of the other types of branded offerings.
Mm-hmm. Mark, whilst I'm with you, actually, would you be able to give an overview of how branded residences can be packaged up? We've talked about the standalone model. Are you able to just give a top line overview for those that might be unaware of how these developments are constructed?
From a physical perspective, or just a different? Okay.
Yeah, physical.
Right. So, in most cases, or let's go back to sort of the original, the original product offering was typically a hotel product that might have, a handful to 45 branded residential units. Typically, on the if it's a tower, they're going to be on the high level of the tower, affording the best views, thereby getting the most premium. In the luxury product, and Louis mentioned this, whereby branded residences started out very much at the luxury level. So it was very important that you would have separate entrances for the residential unit owners, separate elevators, those types of things, so that there was the ability to access the hotel services, but a sense of exclusivity. And when you're at that luxury level, that sense of exclusivity in the physical offering is a critical component. I'll leave it at that for the moment.
Thank you. No,
sure.
Thanks, Mark. Dimitri, I'm going to come to you next, and I believe it was lightly touched on earlier. I believe Louis alluded to it, about the opportunity for a mid-scale product, a branded residence to enter the market. Where do you see the opportunities for either a mid-scale or even a boutique offering?
Yeah, I mean, I know the guys spoke a lot about luxury. I mean, Wyndham, we're the leaders on economy and mid-scale with biggest franchisor in the world, and we saw an opportunity that made a lot of sense. There's a 10% in the world that can afford a luxury residence, but there are 90% in the world like me that I can't. So I will buy something that makes sense, that has value. I think the value proposition is absolutely critical. And you address a market in the mid-scale and upper mid-scale where it makes a lot of sense. So for us, it was obvious that we would enter the space. We enter the space first of all in Spain and Portugal with our branded residences in the mid-scale and upper mid-scale, and it has been a great success. We are expanding. We are expanding that now into the CIS. We're expanding into places like Turkey and like Greece, and we're expanding it into exactly that segment of the market that we believe a huge population actually can afford to buy a mid-scale or an upper mid-scale residence. Circa, I don't know, I can talk about numbers that are $350,000 to $450,000, and they cannot afford the 1.5 million residences. I mean, there's room for everybody, right? There are brands out there that they reflect what the consumers are looking for. What is important to us, and I think Mark made a very good point about the operator. The operator is absolutely critical, and who's developing, and at the same time, it's kind of like where is the location? What is the location, and what is the value proposition? I'll tell you from a Wyndham perspective, for example, we've got a lot happening in the CIS. We just launched about 1,000 residences in the whole of the CIS. Why? Because Chinese are buying. Chinese clients who are investing in the CIS are buying. Being the #1 hotel company in China with about 1,300 hotels, people recognize our brands. So guess what? When somebody is actually selling them a mid-scale product with one of our brands associated with our brands, the security, the safety that everybody spoke about is right there. So why miss that opportunity? I know that we haven't made Luis's report yet because we just started, but I bet you if you have the same webinar next year, you will see us on the top 5 because I believe that 90% out there in the world, they're looking for opportunities that they're not going to cost a fortune, and that's how I see it.
Meredith, I can see your hands up there.
Yeah, I'm curious, Dimitri. When you're developing with Wyndham, are they product within an existing hotel, all new build hotels? Are they standalone?
Good. Yeah, that's a great comment. We started with existing as part of an existing property, and what we've seen, Meredith, recently, especially in the CIS, we've seen standalone, as Mark alluded. You see people saying, you know what, it does make sense to have a hotel, but I've got a lot of demand on the independent standalone residences. So we started with hotels, but now we're moving to standalone, which for us is extremely positive because it means that people get it. It's just not one size fits all. You've got all sorts of different angles to address the consumer. And at the end of the day, it's what the buyer is looking for, right? This dictates what people do. If you can have the best residence in the world. If you don't have anybody buying it or wanting to stay in it, there's no point. So the consumers are dictating what they're looking for.
And Dimitris, staying with you for a moment here, I gave some examples earlier of how non-traditional hospitality brands are entering the market. And we are seeing an influx of new entries. So with supply increasing, with brands increasing, how can businesses and brands distinguish their product offering?
You know what? That has been the challenge of brands, either being hotels or on high street or real estate or whatever, all our lives, right? Why do we stick to one brand? Why do you fly with British Airways versus somebody else? Why do you buy Zara versus somebody else? I think it's got to do with loyalty. We've got 95 million members in our Wyndham Rewards, people who are accustomed to what we do and what we offer. People who feel secure and they feel comfortable with the Wyndham brand and the Wyndham brands. So that's the number one target. So people, one of the offering is your rewards program. Second is the market, how strong you are in the source market. So whoever the buyer is, I mentioned China, for example, if you've got a presence like the one that we've got in China, your Chinese buyers are going to be far more comfortable buying at the Wyndham residence versus somewhere else. And third, and most important, is the salespeople. You know, we tend to forget that nobody's going to walk right there and say, oh, you know what, I've got $1 million to spend or $500,000 to spend. Where can I spend it? You know, salespeople, sales organizations, the people who are actually selling the property and the word of mouth in terms of how good the property is, the location of the property, the services, things that, you know, people, you know, our colleagues here mentioned it already. So it's not just about the brands. There's all sorts of, it's a whole ecosystem that actually needs to work. But above all, it's the value proposition and what the consumer is looking for.
Bear with me one moment, Mark. I'll come to you in just a moment. On that point, Dimitri, I've just made a note in my own notebook about loyalty programs and how important that is to the infrastructure of branded residences. And I'm going to tie this in with a question that's come through from the audience. What's the average sell-through time? So what proportion roughly have been hotel guests previously, and do you require a separate sales team?
Look, I'll tell you from my experience, right, and what I've seen with the people that we've done business already. The clients who've actually stayed with you are your best clients. They are free lead generation, right? They're right there. You can invite them, and you know, we've heard a lot about, you know, in the past about timeshares and fractionals. It's not different. You invite people, they're your captive audience. They're there for a week or 10 days. And you entice them to actually attend the presentation. So that's one. Second, the salespeople and the sales networks that are actually promoting residencies are absolutely critical, right? Even if you are dedicated, let's say you want to buy a car and you go into a car room in a showroom and you know that you want to buy that car. You end up with the wrong salesperson, you end up not buying the car, although you were convinced that you will. So I do not ever underestimate the power of the salespeople and how they present and how they actually reflect on your brand. So, you know, I've seen projects selling out in months. I've seen projects taking years because, you know, they're, again, it's geopolitical challenges, issues that have to do with the economy, the source market. There could be a number of reasons. But in general, I can see the growth of branded residencies as being one of the segments that we saw, especially after COVID, is booming.
Thanks, Dimitri. Over to you, Mark.
Yeah, I was just going to add on Dimitri's comment about the loyalty. We do see that as a huge driver of kind of influence for prospective buyers. We offer, for example, within Accor, an owner benefit program where the buyer of any residential unit receives highest level loyalty. So they're not only getting recognition where they've bought that unit, but they're getting global recognition at any of the hotels within our system that are involved. There's a dedicated residential owner, for lack of a better term, concierge line. So if they're booking reservations, you know, they're contacting their dedicated line. So those are really well taken care of customers. They're your best customer. And if you even think about it from a hotel stay, you always have your very loyal hotel guests. But if someone's spending, $1.5 to $5 million, $10 million on a residential unit, that's a lot of hotel stays. So it's like, they really need to become your top level customers, and you need to take great care of them. And there's privilege within becoming a part of that. So I think that is a real influence. And then obviously the word of mouth that they grant within their circle of friends, it just really helps you build the status of your program.
Thanks, Mark. Louis, coming to you next.
Yeah, I just want to add into that in the sense that one of the things that we've seen And Mark said that there's that loyalty program with Accor where you get preferential treatment in hotels and upgrades and things. But the other thing that we've seen, and I think it's something that we're going to see more of, is within a brand, within a parent group at least, to see almost, and forgive the term, but home swaps between branded resi owners. So if you're part of that loyalty scheme and there might be someone else with a penthouse villa in wherever it may be, Miami versus someone in Thailand, and there may be the opportunity to, within a rental management program as such, if you see what I mean, within those constraints, to almost do house swaps like that. And I think that could be quite an interesting space to, as a differentiator to for brands to explore. I appreciate that it doesn't come without risks or problems and difficulties in management, but it's something we're beginning to hear from the brands that we speak with.
Thanks, Louis. Thanks for flagging that one. It certainly got the cogs in my brain starting to whir a little bit. Meredith, I'd like to bring you into the conversation here. Some of the examples that we've used geographically, aside from the Alpine resorts, have mainly been within cities. And I'd like to ask you, what are those challenges of urban development?
Yeah, I will say that just off the top of my head, always the biggest, I think, challenge on urban development is parking. So that's always a big consideration that you have to always think about. And even as we are, as a global, as a world, everyone is starting to turn towards more economical thinking. And on a hotel side, I do believe that parking is becoming less of a priority. For whatever reasons, the condo market, the residential market has not quite followed suit yet, and everyone still favors, depending on the market, their cars. And I also want to say that we're talking a lot about brands and hotel spaces, which I think, as it was Louis or Mark alluded to, the premium completely exists with, there is a premium if you affiliate your residential development with a brand. However, first and foremost, they are still it's still real estate. So knowing your market, the demand, the supply is really what is going to dictate how successful your project is. And even as much as affiliating with a brand is going to drive specific needs and check boxes, ultimately, it's important to know the market and where we are in certain cycles to determine the success of a specific project.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'll just jump in there.
Sure.
One of the things in most of the projects that we work on, you're working with a local developer who has knowledge of their particular market. They probably hire Louis' firm to do a study for them, just to get an objective third-party appraisal. But in most cases, you're looking at a regional or local developer who has done real estate development within a particular market that the hotel brand or the residential brand is partnering with. So Meredith is spot on. You have to know that there is a buyer for your product out there, and to do the legwork to make sure that that's the case.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Mark. And coming back to Meredith here, my understanding is that AECOM has a pretty large footprint already in the multifamily space, and I'm curious to hear what prompted the decision to move over into the branded residence sector. And can you talk us through the brand selection process?
Well, to be honest, the two projects I spoke of that came to market in the last year and a half were in the works for, between 5 and 10 years prior to coming to market. So it really is cyclical timing, and like why we've shifted our focus a little bit right now into multifamily. It's just what the U.S. market is prioritizing and where we are in the real estate cycle and where people are home buying and interest rates, et cetera. But the process, as I mentioned at the beginning, we partner with developers, as Mark alluded to, that know the market very well. And so in Nashville and in LA who back at, whatever, 5 to 10 years ago, when we were doing the research on what brands to affiliate with, it really had to do with, there was a hotel component and making the entire real estate project pencil. Having the residential component was really important in order to get the overall project financed. So it's all kind of different pieces that you have to put together to make the overall project make sense. And I would say, really depends in those specific instances, what brands were already in the market, what were trying to come out into the market at the time. Pendry residences are new. They have a few now, but at the beginning they didn't when we first were developing with them. So it all kind of depends on what's available and what we think the demand from the buyers will sustain.
Mm-hmm. Whilst I'm with you, Meredith, and I'll open this out to the panel as well to chime in with their own thoughts. What would you say would be the best way to approach a branded residence developer if said person is hoping to have their products used in the development? Could you share any advice as to maybe what you might be looking for or what other developers might be looking for?
Yeah, I think it definitely depends on the type of product that we're speaking about. From my perspective, I think the most interesting products have come via our consultants, our architectural engineer consultants that run the gamut of, everyone that has participated in the construction of the building as I deal with new development. So making those relationships from that angle, I think is premium, and through the operator. I won't say, I feel like the developer, one of the developers we partner with, don't necessarily bring those new, the new technology to the forefront. It's more the people that they employ to help develop the project.
Mm-hmm. Dimitri, I can see your hand is up.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And the other thing is, study your source market. You cannot be jack of all trades because you're going to end up master of none, right? So if you're trying to build something that reflects, and then you probably can do that in cities like New York, and where you've got such a. But if you are in a smaller tier 1 smaller city or tier 2, you got to study who you're selling to. You can build something that people say, oh, I'm not interested in all that. So you go. You might be building facilities that nobody's going to use, and what is your revenue per, because here the story is different. You're not talking about RevPAR, you're talking about revenue per available square meter or square foot. So the world is a completely different space. So from my perspective is study your source market, make sure that you know your potential clients, and interview them, find out what they're looking for. This is not as Mark said earlier, it might be, millions of room nights, but this is not a room night. You're actually doing a substantial financial investment, either being for some 300,000, it's substantial. It doesn't have to be $10 million. So find out what they're looking for. Make sure that you study your source market. Make sure that you bring the salespeople that they understand, they speak the language, they understand the culture, and then I think you've got 50% of the success, and then the product does the rest. And the location, obviously.
Eloise, if I can jump in quickly, It was the perfect pitch for what my team do. It's exactly what we do. So I
will accept the offer. I will accept the job offer, Louis. Thank you.
Hire us to do all the hard work for you. The consultancy, the market analysis, the brand matchmaking, we do it all. So thank you, Eloise. Perfect.
Well, let me come to Mark to talk about brand selection and partnering with the right brands. I know Accor has many brands now. An example I gave earlier was that Mama Shelter under the Ennismore lifestyle division is now entering into the branded residence sector. So how do you weigh up which brand is the right partner for the right project?
So I think it really comes down to what are the goals and objectives of the developer. What is the market dictating relative to the type of product that is going to sell best, and the vision for that product, and kind of matching all of those things up with with the right brand is critical. I mean, there are markets where the cost of the underlying land is so much that you really can't do anything but build a very high-end luxury product to sell it at a level that's going to be able to recoup that initial investment in the land. But as Dimitri has said, there's definitely a product offering that's available for a more mass-produced, mass market product that people are still looking for, that stamp of approval from a brand, that little extra touch of service that they might get from a different brand partner. And sort of on the lifestyle side, as in with Mama Shelter, there's a vibe to it that's just kind of cool, and people like to be associated with that. So that makes it kind of fun. If you live at the Mama Shelter, there's a status to that, even if it's different than living at the Raffles. So I think there is a product available for everyone, and there's you just kind of find these natural fits based on all of those factors that seem to make the choice right.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Mark. Dimitri, you actually planted this seed in my mind around golden visas. And admittedly, it's not something that I had considered before in the broad spectrum world of investing in real estate, and in this instance, branded residences. Do you think that golden visas have made the branded residence product attractive to buyers in the EU?
100%. I mean, if you look back 3 years ago, the whole Portuguese, and I'll mention Portugal because it has been such a great success, the whole Portuguese real estate industry and some of the brands, they actually survived through the Golden Visa program. You see Golden Visa being offered now. I mean, there are different ways that you kind of present what a Golden Visa is. You've got the typical Mediterranean ones, the Cypriots, the Greeks, the Italians, the Portuguese and the Spanish. They sell accommodation and five years residency. Then you've got people in Dubai where you can invest X amount of money and you get a multi-year residency. You've got the UK that talks about investment more than X amount of money and you get a residency. So shall we call them all golden visas? These are all incentives that the governments have put together to do two things: revitalize the real estate economy and make sure that they are competitive to everybody else. But at the same time, it gave developers in the real estate space and the hotel space to actually promote products to people who wanted to buy 5 years of residency in the EU for whatever reason, right? So I think brand residencies and golden visa go hand in hand. Obviously, as I said, golden visa is responsible for revitalizing a lot of real estate developers in various countries. Will it become stricter in the future? I think as the EU is looking at the whole idea of immigration and so forth, it will become a bit more challenging, I would imagine. But again, what Mark said about brands, and I will mention again the Chinese, right? If you live in China, where one of the biggest buyers of golden visa product in the EU, and you've got 1,300 Wyndham properties across, in various cities in China, you feel far more secure and far more comfortable, especially when you're buying off, you haven't actually seen the product. Only Luis will tell you a lot of those sales are happening and they haven't even seen the product. They've never been there. So I think the security and the comfort of the brand, no matter what that brand is absolutely critical. So yeah, golden visas absolutely tick the box, and it will continue, and it will go hand in hand with brand residences and the growth we see.
Thanks, Dimitri. Louis, I'd like to bring you back into the conversation here, and you highlighted a good example earlier about the home swap scheme. And my question to you is how innovative is the branded residence sector? And I'd like to tie in a follow-up as to whether you foresee increased competition with serviced apartments.
I mean, for us, we've seen it's constantly evolving. The sector is constantly moving, trying to change, trying to find points of differentiation. And I think probably the key part here is probably the advent of non-hotelier brands. That's the biggest change, the sector has seen. Obviously, we've talked about chain scales and about different scales of brands coming in, but to see that, it's a lot harder for those non-hotelier lifestyle brands to come in because they can't rely on the operational structure model that a hotel provides before. So to come in and actually compete at the top end without that operational structure in place, quite often these brands are using white labels to operate their brand residences. I think it's pretty amazing. And looking just at the non-hotelier brands, we're seeing the automotive brands come in, fashion brands, design brands. I mean, it's mad. It's absolutely mad. And even across some of the hotelier brands, I mean, I think back to about 3 or 4 years ago, I won't tell you who the brand was because I'm not sure if it will go ahead, but we were looking at residential cruise ships under a flagship brand name. So I think there's always space for new ideas and inventions to come in. And I guess it's up to the next brand to come in and show us what's new. It could be a private jet for all we know, but I think that's a super interesting space. And I think that these non-hotelier brands are really, really competing at the top end without the basis for it. And then to follow up on your second question, service apartments, we see service apartments a bit of a separate model. So for us, brand residences are set as singly owned, apartments that are owned by one individual that can be rented out, that are privately owned or not. And for us, service apartments are a bit of a different model. You have a selection of apartments that are centrally owned, operated a bit more like a hotel, but obviously orientated towards long stay. So for us, it's kind of two different models. Yes, I mean, having serviced apartments means that on the rental front, so if you have a brand residence rental management program, there's going to be, if there's a huge increase in service apartments, there's going to be a bit of overlap on the tenant side. But ultimately, what are you going in for? You're going in for that serviced element. And I go back to the point that everyone on this panel, I feel, has mentioned today, is you're actually paying for the brand, not necessarily getting, your turn down service in the evening or your complimentary breakfast in the morning. What you're getting is the brand reassurance. You're getting everything that the brand offers. So I think it kind of operates separately, in that what you're paying for in branded apartments will always be brand related. And it's all the more the case with non-hotelier brands.
I think I covered a story, couple of stories last year in China. There's a Hello Kitty hotel coming to China. And we also have a Fila branded hotel coming to China, which is a sportswear, and both of which are going to fall under Hyatt's JDV collection. So it makes me wonder what non-hotelier brand Hyatt might tap up next. But we have some questions from the audience, and I'd like to stay with Louis for the first one here, as I'm assuming you may have some data to support this. Are buyers of branded residential still typically buying as a second or third home? Is there data showing an increase in buyers purchasing as their primary residence?
Almost going to come up in our next report. No, so look, in truth, look, we look at this a lot, we analyze this a lot. The reality is that second home purchases tends to be where branded resi operates its best, not only if there's a rental management program in place, because then that can tap into all sorts of different advantages, yields for the buyer, for the owners, and additional inventory for the brands. But we are seeing, and it's all location really. We're seeing an uprise in primary homes. It's just the model. Again, it comes down to chain scales. Honestly, like owning these branded residences, as I think Mark said or Dimitris said at the beginning, you're looking at really at the luxury end, the top 1%. So it's not that accessible to everyone, and with that, the reality is the service charges are hefty. So if you're just there you know, benefiting from all the services, you are paying a hefty charge at the end of the year. So actually, if there is a rental scheme, or there is the opportunity to alleviate those charges, I think that's where it's going to happen, and that tends to happen in second, third, fourth, fifth homes, more so than otherwise.
Don't suppose you have an overview of the average yields for owners participating in rental pool schemes?
That's a really, really mean question. Look, again, I'm gonna slightly curveball this one, because it really depends on location. You can get locations, if you're in emerging markets, your rental potentials are huge. If you're in established markets, you know, okay, let's say broadly speaking, 3 to 5%. I think that's a fair comment, and that's, you know, there's obviously exceptions to that everywhere.
Thanks, Louis. Sorry about that last question, but if anything, incentive to get on and download that new report that's coming out soon.
Well, actually, if I can add, actually, and I'm sorry to plug this, but I think it will be useful for everyone. We, as some of the audience might know, we have a report that we release annually, and actually this year will be the first year where we do quarterly reports where we focus on specific geographical sectors. So I think our next report will be coming up in the next week or so, which will focus on Europe, and then we'll go over to Middle East, and then do APAC at the end. So it will really try and target, because like I said, those locations are so variant that actually I think having focused reports might help people in certain destinations.
Thanks, Louis. And I'd have one final question that I would like to ask Dimitri, because it was slightly alluded to earlier, where we looked at serviced apartments and non-hotelier brands entering the market. But Dimitri, if branded resident supply levels are increasing and we are seeing new players in the market, what impact is that going to have on hotels?
Wow, I remember exactly the same conversation when Airbnb actually showed up as the death and the end of the hotel industry. I think they're complementing each other. I think there's growth. 100 years ago, we were 1 billion people on Earth. Now, 100 years later, we're 7.2 billion people. So that means more people to travel. In 2019, I think there were 2.2 billion travelers around the world. So what does that mean? That every single segment of the hospitality industry that makes people travel more, and that's exactly what those segments do. It's actually to the benefit of everybody who's part of the industry. And remember, in the past few years back, if you look, all the marketeers, they used to put people in brackets. They say, oh, you know what, Louis belongs into this kind of consumer group, or Dimitri belongs to this, or whatever. I can fly Ryanair to a destination with 45 euros, and I can stay at a 500 hotel a night. So the world has changed, right? You can see people who get on a private jet, and I don't know, 3 months later they go on a camping holiday. The world is transforming itself in such an extent that trying to put people into brackets or buckets or tribes, as they used to call them, I think you're lost. So what has that done? That has actually given the opportunity for every single segment to grow. Hotels are growing, Airbnb is growing, serviced apartments will grow, branded residences will grow. I think there is room for everybody, as long as we do it, and this is huge for me, as long as we do it sustainably, and as long as we do it in a way that we respect this wonderful place that we all live on. As long as we do those two things, there is room to grow in the years to come.
Thanks, Dimitri. Thanks for that rather positive end note to this conversation. We have fast approached 3 o'clock, so I am going to wrap up for today. Just to highlight that this session is going to stay open for an additional 2 minutes right at the end for our audience members to follow up on any of the links that we have popped into the chat today. But my next webinar is going to be about advanced technology, and that is taking place on the 13th of March. I would love to see you all there, and the link to register for that webinar has been popped into the chat. And if you would like further information about our webinars, our webinar series, or any of the brands within our portfolio, please do reach out to my colleague Katie and Steph. Their contact details have also been popped up on your screen. So all that's left for me to do today is to say thank you. Thank you to Meredith, Mark, Dimitri, and Louis for your insights. Thank you to our sponsors like Magic and London Rock Partners. We will be sending out our weekly e-newsletter on Wednesday. So if you haven't already subscribed to BHN, do get on over there, subscribe to our newsletter so we can stay up to date. Otherwise, I will see you on the 13th of March for the next webinar in our series. Do take care, folks, and see you all again very soon.